Hi students, this is Mrs. T, and we're in week 9 and this is lesson 2. There will be multiple parts for lesson 2 also. So you will see me for this part 1 for lesson 2, and we will continue to talk about chapter 7, which is all about religion and how we look at religions globally and classify religions and that kind of thing. And you will have some supplemental videos required. Sorry, they're supplemental to just hearing me all the time, but they're required, and you'll have quiz questions about them that are also going to be posted in this week 9 folder. So look for multiple parts for lesson 2. Okay, so the last time we saw each other, you were taking notes about different types of religions. For instance, monotheistic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, or polytheistic religions like in Hinduism or in Greek or Egyptian traditional religions. Norse traditional religions are polytheistic. And also animism. Animism is a classification of religion that has spirit world components to it, where there's not really a centralized deity or pantheon of gods, but instead spirits that exist in all living things, whether they are animate, meaning alive, or inanimate, meaning they don't move around, they don't breathe and have the kinds of characteristics that humans and animals do. So that was the way we classified religions the last time we saw each other, but today we're going to classify religions in a different way and look at the way certain religions act as a cultural hearth. So we'll have to look back to chapter like 4 or 5, I can't remember which one, to find out what cultural hearth means if it doesn't come right to mind. But it's a centralized location that's usually the bed, the origin, the birth of a cultural component. And it's the center where cultural components are diffused across space, across time. So a hearth is a centralized location where cultural diffusion takes place from that nucleus, so to speak. And so religions, when we look at religions throughout history, we can find certain places on the globe where religions were born, and certain religions are universalizing religions that spread, and other religions are associated with your ethnic group that's typically tied to a region, tied to your kinship group, tied to your way of life like agriculture or foraging, these kinds of things. And they stay localized, and their mission is not to convert others and bring more people into their fold, so to speak, but instead it's more focused on the kinship group that they come from, and they maybe have ancestor worship as part of their behavior, part of their religious belief and practice, and those kinds of things. Okay, so those are the two ways that we're going to classify religions today. We're going to look at some that are universalizing and some that are ethnically tied. Okay, so ethnic religions, they are very numerous. You will find thousands of them around the world, but probably to our Western mind, we're not very familiar with the beliefs, and maybe even the beliefs sound odd, I guess I'll say. That's my least ethnocentric word that I can think of here. They definitely sound odd or very special to us because they're typically very different from the way Westerners like you and me are typically brought up to believe if we are brought up in a religious context. And since religion is very, very, very influential over other aspects of culture, as hopefully you've watched Afghan Star by now, and you know how significantly Islam as the dominant religion affects the art world, affects clothing, affects behaviors that are expected or shocking in life. Especially if you watched past that 30-minute mark where I asked you to stop. If you watched on through to the end, you'll see some major controversy over something that they call dancing that you and I maybe wouldn't even call dancing. So anyway, it's interesting to see how different culture can be because a religion has a certain belief system, and people are united around that belief system, and therefore they are very ethnocentric about this should be the norms, this should be the values, this should be the normal everyday practice in our daily lives, not only within the confines of worship. So, ethnic religions are found in particular locations, particular regions where ethnic groups, tribes have lived for centuries, even millennia in some cases. Ethnic religions typically are passed from one generation to the next within the same kinship group or collection of kinship groups that have always been affiliated with each other. And so ethnic religions don't tend to have this universalizing idea that they have a mission to go out and convert people to the way that they believe. They are very ethnocentric themselves about their beliefs being correct, but I also find most of the ethnic religions that I have studied, I find them to be very, very tolerant of the fact that other religions exist, but at the same time, the fact that you and I follow a different religion than what they follow, for instance, that's one of the ways that they identify us as other, and they see themselves as a cohesive group, with religion being one of their dominant unifying factors within that religious group. So, ethnic religions stay ethnic, stay regional, stay local, and they don't really have this diffusion out into other regions of the world. They don't access or invite in other racial groups, other sex groups, other genders, any of those other culturally identifying components that we examined together in chapter 5, I think it was. But universalizing religions, on the other hand, that's what we're going to look at for most of the rest of the time we have together today. Universalizing religions, for the most part, spread widely around the world because wrapped up in the belief system of a universalizing religion is the call, so to speak, to spread knowledge, include as many people as possible, because in that belief system there tends to be this idea that that way is correct, or that way that they believe in their religion is the only path toward a good outcome, a favorable outcome in the afterlife that we talked about. So again, we're back to this question about religion being this faith system that people really buy into because it gives us answers to questions that science can't answer for us. And those answers are very satisfying. But once you are reared in a religion, once you have been enculturated in your religious group, other ideas about those answers to those ultimate questions sound odd, and we identify against other groups, typically. Universalizing religions typically have that aspect to them. Not only do you want to bring in a whole bunch of people into the fold, but if people are unwilling to come into the fold or disagree with your belief system because they're culturally attached or feel solidarity with their original belief system, identifying against the other really causes conflict, and it bleeds over into politics. And so, for instance, there's a section in chapter 7 that talks about the religious aspect of conflict, or the religious aspect of the political process, making laws, making restrictions and guidelines from the government level that trickle down into the population, and how much religion can affect those kinds of decisions in the political realm, in the political level. Okay, so universalizing religions, we can look in history, and I'm going to show you a short video from the Business Insider. Let me get it started really quick. It's called How the 5 Major World Religions Spread. However, it really doesn't, in my opinion, it really doesn't answer how. It gives us a few little facts along the way. I've got the volume turned down for this because it's only music anyway, so I wanted to point out these different facts as we go by. First of all, as this starts to play, you will see 5 religions mentioned up here. Really only 3 of those religions are universalizing religions. and each of them have a color code. So we're going to be seeing a world map, and we're going to see these colors expand or contract on this world map as a timeline across the bottom goes through history. And so I'll stop it periodically, and we can talk about what's happening dynamics-wise with these cultural hearts of these religions and how they spread, or why they spread. So here's our world map. There's our religions, color-coded, and we see that Hinduism is the oldest religion. It goes back to at least 300 BCE, or 300 BC, before Common Era. The Indus River Valley. And now, here's a significant one. You see this dot that's placed right here? That is a town or a city-state called Ur, U-R. Ur is the place where Abraham was born. This is significant in the spread of religions worldwide because 3 of these religions up at the top here claim Abraham as one of the founding fathers, so to speak, or one of the central ancient figures in their religion. Which religions are those 3? Do you know? Judaism is one, Christianity is another, and Islam. So, Judaism looks at Abraham as one of the founding fathers or elder prophets in that religion, and Christianity looks to Abraham in much the same way, but in particular, one of his offspring, Isaac. Isaac tends to be the bloodline from which Christianity claims a kinship connection to Abraham and other Jews. Islam, on the other hand, claims Abraham and Abraham's eldest son, Ishmael. So Ishmael is the major connection, the bloodline from whom members of Islam, Muhammad himself and members of Islam, followed. And so Abraham is this central figure in these 3 dominant religions that you can see across your screen, and that's one of the reasons why he's mentioned, his name is mentioned in this survey of religious expansion. So Abraham is born in Ur. You can follow this timeline down here. Now you see Judaism just expands a little bit and then contracts. You're going to see Buddha born. This is our next Siddhartha Buddha born, and you see the yellow over the red turns it orange, but it kind of really spread right there. You see this little enclave of Jerusalem around Jerusalem and what we know of as Israel now. And Jesus Christ was crucified, and Jews were exiled from the region, and you see Christianity spreading in these little pockets based on where the Jews were exiled. Okay, let me stop it here really quick, because you saw that Muhammad was born down here, that was the little dot still on the map, and that Islam spreads very, very rapidly. So one of the tenets, one of the pillars of Islam has to do with spreading the religion. So in Christianity, we have something called the 10 Commandments, and in Islam, they have something called the 5 Pillars. And so that might be something interesting for you to look into for a reaction paper about the spread of religion in the world. Some of you might already be familiar with the 5 Pillars of Islam, but one of the pillars of Islam has within it the requirement that you should spread your faith as vigorously as possible. And so you see this border here, and here's Spain. I don't know if you can tell right up there, but you're looking at the Mediterranean Sea, and all of the purple area is Christianity, specifically Catholicism. That's the only kind of Christianity that existed in the world from the death of Jesus Christ until really Henry VIII and Martin Luther were really the first 2, and then John Calvin also, were really the only 3 really successful Protestant leaders. The protest word in Protestant means that they were protesting against some of the beliefs or practices, more practices of the Catholic hierarchy rather than the belief system, really. So these purple areas that are labeled as Christian here really are Catholic regions. And so when you read about or study about the Crusades in history in the United States, as you'll see in a minute on another map that I'm going to show you, in the United States where we live in what we call the Bible Belt, it's very Protestant dominated and very Anglo-Saxon Protestant dominated. And there's a very strong bias, a very strong ethnocentric bias among Protestants in the United States, especially against Catholics. So in our history books, when we learn about the Crusades, typically we get the message that the Crusades were a bad deal and they were, Catholics trying to take over the world or something. Well, a universalizing religion is supposed to do that. It's part of the tenets of belief. But really, it was just as much trying to protect against the spread of Islam into traditionally Catholic areas than it was about spreading Catholicism to additional areas in the world. You see that Islam took over Jerusalem, took over this area that was typically that is where Judaism was originally, and they were exiled up here. And then Christianity, of course, claims this connection to Jerusalem also. And so this was about really defending territory against identifying against another religious system that had beliefs very contrary to what Europe's dominant beliefs were. But you see Islam. If I said Hinduism a minute ago, I meant Islam. Islam spread very, very rapidly all across North Africa and even up over here into Spain. And so Spain, for a very long time, there were many Jews that were exiled and went to Spain. Of course, Spain is known as a Catholic country. And so for a century or more, Spain had a religious system where within the government there were different rules for Islam followers, different rules for Jews, and different rules for Catholics. And you might have heard of the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition did not have jurisdiction over the Jews and the Muslims who lived there. They had jurisdiction over Catholics only, and in particular questioned Jews called conversos who had maybe a couple of generations before converted, and there was some questions about whether their conversion was genuine or not. And so we can even look at an era that some of us are familiar with, and we maybe even have a very ethnocentric bias against just the word Inquisition. But this court, the Inquisitor court, that Ferdinand and Isabella established was to try to protect the purity, I guess you would say, of the Catholic faith among people who identified as Catholics within their kingdom. And so it was focused a lot on alternative beliefs and people who were bringing some of their religious syncretic, or syncretism is a word that you can ask Siri how to spell and look up the definition, but it means merging of a variety of religious beliefs into maybe a third or a fourth religious belief that kind of stands with differences in comparison to the original. So we see this spread of Islam very, very rapid. Let's look to see what happens next. You see how Buddhism has spread all over China when we weren't even looking. All over China, you see Japan over here, and so Buddhism is spreading all over Indonesia. Hinduism has kind of stuck in place. Kind of stuck in place. You're going to see a little bit of Christianity, again Catholicism taking over Spain again. Look at this time in history. We don't have any kind of religion other than Catholicism just yet. And now we see Spain and Portugal going to what we call the New World. And so this purple is called Christianity, but please remember it is until right about now on the timeline, around the end of the 1500s really, before any kind of Protestant faith really took off and had many followers. Here's the partition of Africa, where you see Islam to the north and Christianity to the south. A lot of religious syncretism occurs in Africa. Let me stop it really quick right there. I don't want to, we're almost to the year 2000 on this map, but I want to make sure that we see Israel happen. No, I didn't back it up, but the country that you know of as Israel, there it was, occurred after World War II. So you see that tiny little, you see that tiny little spot on the map. I need to keep going back. Right there. So blue again. We have blue again on the map. It is not a universalizing religion. It's a very oppressed religion, typically worldwide, wherever it has been exiled. They've usually not been first-class citizens, at least not treated that way. Of course, the Holocaust exterminated millions in Europe during that terrible part of human history. But you see this teeny tiny little part of the Middle East here, of the Mediterranean Sea, where Israel was established. Well, this was a forced political thing that occurred. And so you hear a lot about political unrest along places called the Gaza Strip, or how Jerusalem is divided into two different parts. You know, there's a Muslim sector and there's a Jewish sector, for instance. So it's very contentious because Islam controlled this area until just after World War II, and this was sort of forced on the population. Not sort of, it was forced on the Palestinians, and this area was annexed, so to speak, and used for the ancestral homeland of the Jews. So Judaism is not technically an ethnic religion. It is a monotheistic religion, but it usually is associated with a bloodline that can be tracked back to historic figures that are written about in the Old Testament. And this is also the land that's written about in the Old Testament. And so it is heritage for the Jewish faith. And when we were talking about ethnic religions, we talked about the importance of location, region, and place for those religions that tend to pass that belief from one generation to the next, rather than trying actively to seek converts and grow that way. People do convert to Judaism, but it's not like an active tenet in their belief system where you're supposed to actively go out, you know, send people to knock on doors, you know, go door to door in Mexico City or something and try to get people to convert to Islam, or excuse me, Judaism. It doesn't happen. Okay, now we can play it. And you see pretty much all of North and South America are Christianity. And since we are this far ahead in the timeline, we cannot say that this is all Catholicism anymore, because after the 1500s, you saw many, really three dominant Protestant religions, and then after the Anglo-Saxons brought their version of Protestantism to the eastern shore of the United States, and France sold the Louisiana Purchase, and the fights with Mexico over where the border was, that Anglo-Saxon Protestant spread through this manifest destiny notion, went from New England really all the way to that border of California. And so we typically think of the United States as a Christian nation, but the kind of Christian that we think of when we say that is Protestant Christianity. And in the Bible Belt, you will see things like Baptist, or we even have the name Southern Baptist. The Baptist faith is a uniquely American thing, so it did not exist until the United States existed. And so it's, you know, separated by that many degrees or something, however you want to classify it, from the life of Christ, for instance, and the people immediately around Christ and that bloodline. So we don't have that bloodline connection anymore. And it's like other Christian faiths, Baptist and Methodist and Presbyterian and Catholicism and all of those Christian faiths, Mormons consider themselves, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints consider themselves to be Christian. I've heard a lot of debate with other Christian sects about whether they actually are Christian or not, because if I understand correctly, they don't see Jesus Christ as God. They see him as a prophet, I believe, a central figure in their religion, but maybe not a God to be worshipped, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, we see a lot of unique and new, in the world scheme, views about Christianity pop up in the United States, where part of our cultural identity is individualism and thinking for ourselves and making our own personal interpretations of things. And so we see Protestantism really taking off in the United States. And in Europe, in England also, where King Henry VIII really obliterated the Catholic Church when he broke away from it in the 1500s. As a matter of fact, many people in England today refer to people on the European continent, particularly France and Spain, as the Latins, because Latin is the language of the Catholic Church, the original language of the Catholic Church, and Latin America, in that case, is called Latin America because you saw those spread lines, those diffusion lines of from Portugal and Spain coming to the New World, and the religion that they brought with them was Catholicism. And it spread all throughout Central and South America and on up through all of the Louisiana Territory up through to Alaska, and parts of Ontario and everything, with the French being over there. So, religion is something that we can follow in cultural geography and look at maps, very interesting maps like this one, to see where things have spread and where the nuclei are of the different religions in the world. So on this map that you're looking at, you'll probably have to blow it up to actually be able to see it. But on this map, yellow is Roman Catholic. So you can see all of South America and most of that area that I was kind of tracing in my mind when I did my hands like this a minute ago. All of Europe here, there's Italy and Eastern Europe and Spain and Portugal and France here. Part of Ireland, Southern Ireland is the Catholic region of Ireland. Here's that area in Ontario. New England is a very Catholic area of the United States. A lot of immigrants, German and Italian and Irish, among other ethnic groups that relocated there and brought their Catholic faith with them. Of course, all of this kind of whitish area is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that we mentioned, classified as other down here in the Christianity column. And then this orange is the Protestant areas. And so you can see that all of England, a lot of Norway and Sweden, these areas up here, Germany, where Luther started his religion. Protestant faith is spread in these areas. So we're smack dab in the middle of the Bible Belt, and it's the Bible Belt because Protestants very often in their religious practice don't look at centuries of tradition, centuries of ceremony, centuries of apostolic connection. Instead, they look at the Bible as the source of all beliefs. Interestingly enough, the version of the Bible that they look at was edited sometime around 1650, I want to say. You can Google when the King James Version of the Bible was actually written, but the Bible went from this long to like this long because a very good writer, very poetic writer, King James, got his hands on it and changed quite a lot of the messaging that was original to the Bible. The Catholic Church actually put the Bible together in the 400s, 480, I want to say. The Catholic Church compiled all of the books of the Bible based on tradition, based on apostolic tradition. They looked at the kinds of things that the missionaries were using to convert people and spread the religion, and based on that tradition, the books that people did use to convert people compared to the books that some people claimed were part of divine tradition, And so the tradition of the Catholic Church designed the Bible, called it the Bible. It was the only kind of Bible until others edited it down to what we have, the most common version that we have today. And so that's why it's called the Bible Belt, because most of these religions around here look to the Bible and only the Bible without any kind of connection, historical connection to any of the traditions or cultural identity that has any connection whatsoever to Rome or the Catholic Church. So there's a lot of identity against the other in that case. From all of these, I'm just explaining the Bible Belt because that's where we are, that's where our school is, and where a lot of us come from, but any of these are just, the same. Mormons, for instance, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's considered the other, are the same way. They try to convert and think that they have the only true path, for instance. Orthodox, which you see all over Greece and Russia. There are actually two different church systems, Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox. That is not a Protestant group, but sort of a splinter group from the Catholic Church that kept really, really old traditions, and is recognizably a different set of traditions and beliefs now from what is considered to be Roman Catholicism. So this map is an interesting look at how that other animated map ended up in the world and how these religions are distributed. The dominant Christian faiths in the world are definitely Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy, whereas Protestant faiths, collectively all of them, and there's something like 200 denominations, something like that, so collectively all of them are the smallest groups with, of the three large groups of Christianity worldwide. Okay, so that concludes our look at religion for this chapter. I'm going to put a couple of other videos up for you to watch. Please text me with questions. Please use any of these topics or multiple topics to Google, find out more about, use as an outside source for your reaction paper. Have fun with this, but don't use this opportunity to discuss religion from an ethnocentric point of view. We're not going to do that in this class. If we need to talk about ethnocentrism and religion, we will do it objectively without saying that this particular religion did this and they are wrong for that. We are just going to look at the cultural identity component of religion, the unifying factors of religion that the belief creates in people because of ethnocentrism, and how ethnocentrism can cause us to identify against the other and fight viciously in some cases, because we think our way is the best and others think their way is the best, and that clash is just more than a peace-loving person can take sometimes, and you'll see world wars fought with religious components as some of the main motivations for the war. So please text me if you have questions. I'm there for you, and thank you for participating in class this way. I know you're an online student, so you're used to that, but my face-to-face students, I know you miss me terribly. I miss you, but we'll stay in contact with each other this way, and don't forget to text me. I probably have, well, I've got two from just sitting here talking to you, so I will check on those threads right now and get back to you as soon as I can. If I forget to answer your text, or it's been too long and you need an answer now, then text me over again, because I'm surprised there's only 2 texts waiting for me. I've awakened most mornings during this social distancing that we're doing. I've awakened most mornings to 17 or more text messages overnight, so I'm hoping that I'm getting to you in time. If I forgot to reply, please send me a reminder that you've got a question dangling out there that I need to answer for you, because I want to answer your question. So I hope to see you in person very soon, whether you're an online student or face-to-face. I want to give you a great big hug at graduation when I get to usher there. So see you soon. Stay happy, healthy, and safe.